You're listening to another edition of MCX Sports Podcast, 88.9 FM, Monmouth University.
WMCX Sports back with another podcast this week. Last week we touched on the men's basketball offseason. This week we're going to head into Monmouth men's baseball. I'm Mike Zimmermann, joined by Joe Lacalandra. And Joe, Monmouth baseball on an 11-game winning streak, getting hot at the right time heading into the MAC tournament.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Mike. They are getting hot at the right time. They've climbed up about 3 or 4 spots in the MAC standings. Right now they stand at 4th, but they're just a half game behind Fairfield for 3rd. They've leapfrogged Quinnipiac, who's been on a losing streak as of late, and this team has really, they've turned a corner. I talked to Coach Ehalt a few weeks ago, and he was telling me about how the team was distracted with all the rainouts and all the other things where, you know, with the games being canceled. We just had such a rough winter here, and it certainly wasn't good for the baseball team. But now that they've been able to play consistently a couple times a week, you've really started to see some great results, and a lot of different guys are contributing for them right now.
Absolutely. You mentioned a couple guys really contributing. Robbie Alessandrine has really stepped up at the plate. We knew he's a great fielder, great with the glove, but he's coming up with some big hits at the plate, which is a bonus with a guy like Alessandrine, who's really in there for his glove. He's coming through with a lot of big hits, driving in runs as well, coming in at the 9-hole in the lineup, as well as Danny Avella. Danny Avella is starting to get back on track when we saw him about 2 years ago, bringing that power to the lineup. He had a monstrous home run on Saturday in the first game of the doubleheader. So I think there's a lot of guys in this lineup really stepping up, and you also have your senior leadership from John Gaida, Jake Gronsky, and in the pitching rotation, Andrew McGee as well.
Just to touch on Alessandrine, he's really been a huge surprise. I wrote an article yesterday on the blog about just the complete turnaround he's had. You know, a couple weeks ago, WMCX did the game against Temple where Jake Gronsky got thrown out of the game for arguing balls and strikes. And at that point in the game, Monmouth was losing 2-1. And I remember talking about it on the broadcast. We didn't know how that would affect the team because Jake had played every inning of every game so far.
Number 3 hitter as well.
And Alessandrine had struggled at the plate to that point in the year. He was only 13 for 60 at the plate so far, which is for about 217 average. So we didn't know what was gonna happen there. And you mentioned it. Gronsky hits 3rd in the lineup, so he was thrust into the 3rd spot. And sure enough, come the 7th inning, he came up in a big spot, and he came through with a hard single to right field to drive in the go-ahead run. And ever since then, he hasn't looked back. I mean, going into yesterday's game, he was 13 for his last 25. He had another hit, another RBI yesterday. So he's been batting, the last 9 games about 500. So on the season, he's over 300. He's one of now 5 different Monmouth University hitters that are hitting over 500. Avella is another one of those guys. You talked about it before. He's been, as far as power goes, he's been Monmouth's best power hitter the last month. I mean, you mentioned Sweeney before. He's been probably the most consistent power guy, but now Avella has taken the team lead in RBIs from him. He's tied him with the team lead in home runs with 3. He's hitting the most doubles on the team with 13. I think he's in the top 5 in the MAC as well in double. So those 2 guys right there, added along with the consistency of Gronsky and Sweeney, and adding a rookie, a guy like Lamberton in that lineup, everything's just come together at the right time. That would be why they're winning. And I haven't even mentioned how good the pitching staff has been.
Well, I'm going to get to that pitching staff right now. Over this 11-game winning streak and over this past weekend, they clinched a berth in the MAC tournament. Now that they know they're in, they can sort of get their pitching rotation set up for those upcoming games. And the one thing Monmouth has going for them is their depth of starting pitching. Obviously, you're going to have your Andrew McGee, TJ Hunt, and Chris McKenna, but they also have guys like Singer, Tremarco, and even Uninger who have starting experience if they need to go to them. So I think that's one thing Monmouth has to go for their advantage going into the tournament.
You mentioned 5 guys right there, and you add Tremarco and Singer to that. Singer's been a little bit up and down. He's had some good starts. He's had some really bad starts as well. I got to see Tremarco pitch in person. He's kind of been like that jack of all trades for Monmouth, where he started last year. He actually wound up being one of the better pitchers on the team last year as a freshman. This year, since you said that the pitching staff is so deep, there wasn't really need for him to start. So, and Coach Ehalt even mentioned this to me when I talked to him, that they were trying to find a way to get Tremarco to start a couple games, and they weren't able to do that because of all the rainouts. Well, he wound up starting the one game against Temple. He wound up getting the win. He pitched 7 strong innings that time. He's been real good out of the bullpen as well to go along with another couple guys I'm sure we'll talk about in the bullpen. I think the bullpen's been the biggest strength of this team. Myself.
I want to get to that after you're finished. But if you want to bring that up now, you talk about Stephen Fry, Japaglione. They've been very strong, and including Tremarco, who's come out of the bullpen as well.
And don't forget Ricky Dennis, who's pitched 15 scoreless innings this year. Fry has not allowed a run in MAC play this year. If you look at the scores for the last 3 innings, which are typically the 3 innings your bullpen's going to see a lot of time in, Monmouth has only given up 31 runs in the last 3 innings of the game. So 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, as compared to their offense has scored 51 runs in those 3 innings. So that's a big difference right there. Their bullpen has done a great job of holding it together. We mentioned the starting pitching. It's been a little bit inconsistent this year. I know if you talk to Andrew McGee himself, I'm sure he's a little bit disappointed in how his season's gone. But he pitched very well this past weekend. And, like you said, they have a couple games this week coming up against Canisius. So really, they clinched that spot, but this is a time for them to figure out what spot they want to be in. Can they be 3rd, 4th, or 5th? Those seem to be the 3 logical spots, but either way, they'll be able to set up the rotation any which way they want going into the MAC tournament.
And I know you touched on just before a guy like Grant Lamberton, the freshman coming in, really put in the middle of that lineup. He's having a big freshman year so far. How important is this for this Monmouth team to incorporate some veterans, but also some young talent as well? You can also look at Chris Gaetano, who's seen some at-bats throughout the season. But so you mix in those young guys like Grant Lamberton and Chris Gaetano, and you also put them in with seniors like Jake Gronsky, John Gaida, the guys with experience as well. Is that a formula for success? Something that you need to have a winning team?
You need to have a mixture of the two, I think. You have your veteran leadership with Gronsky and Gaida, you said, and Sweeney. Those guys, have been around. They've done it here, but those guys are going to graduate at some point, and a lot of guys are graduating. I don't know what the number is of seniors on the team, but I know it's a lot. They had senior day here yesterday, and we talked about him before. Alessandrine's another young guy. He's a sophomore who's probably going to be the guy that replaces Gronsky next year at second base. So be able to give him at-bats either in the second base spot or third base spot, as long with Lamberton at third base.
Even shortstop as well with Alessandrine, because Gaida will be graduating as well. So that shortstop hole is a big concern.
There are going to be spots to fill next year, and the fact that these guys are able to get at-bats young in their career, early on in their careers, and they're producing the way they are, Lamberton hitting .306 and Alessandrine hitting .303 to go along with good defense, is huge.
Absolutely. And one thing, we keep bouncing around here, but there's so much to talk about with this team. In this 11-game winning streak, they've now clinched a MAC tournament berth. But I want to talk about the relationship between the pitchers and the catcher Kyle Perry behind the plate. He hasn't had the greatest of seasons at the plate hitting, but behind the plate defensively, he's done an outstanding job, whether it's just blocking balls in the dirt or even just with that relationship between the pitchers. He knows what kind of pitches his pitchers can throw, and I think he's done a great job of managing that staff.
Well, in my opinion, that's a catcher's first job, is to manage the pitching staff, get them in the right spots and the right pitches, knowing when to call pitch outs, knowing when to throw over to first base. He's in relation. I mean, the catcher's really your manager on the field. So, in my opinion, anything you get extra from the catcher at the plate is a bonus. So, you mentioned Kyle Perry and Connor White. Those are the two guys who have manned behind the plate for Monmouth this year. They don't have the most gaudiest of batting averages, but like you said, their job is really to deal with the staff, which has been, by and large, one of the strengths of this team, and they're a big reason for that. And anything you get from them at the plate is a bonus.
Absolutely. Now, heading into tournament time, what do the Hawks need to do in order to be successful? It could be so easy in saying just keep doing what they're doing because they've been so successful on this 11-game winning streak. But say they wipe the slate clean heading into a conference tournament. What do they need to do in order to come away with a conference title?
It's got to be. It revolves around the pitching staff, and Chris McKenna, this is one debate we can have. Who's going to start that first tournament game for Monmouth? Will it be Andrew McGee, who was their number one starter coming into the year, or will it be Chris McKenna? We can get to that in a second because McKenna has been the best pitcher this year, I think, on the staff. But to me, it comes down to your pitching staff, which has been solid. They need to continue to be solid, and your offense has to score early. And that's been a big thing in this winning streak. They've been able to put up 2, 3, 4 runs early in the game. I mean, yesterday they scored 6 runs in the first inning of that game, and essentially the game was over after the first inning. So if you can jump on teams early and just let your guys go out and throw pitches, and you continue to, not have to do too much as far as the pitching staff, not try to strike guys out, let the guys put the ball in play, I think Monmouth's going to be fine.
Speaking of pitching staff, going into the tournament, you mentioned who's going to be that number 1 starter for Game 1. You know what? I think it might be too early to tell because we're not sure who's going to start this week against Canisius. Whether Coach Dean Holt wants to maybe save someone, maybe save an Andrew McGee. Don't pitch him against Canisius, so he's ready for the conference tournament. It's up to what happens during this week, how each pitchers are managed, and I think that's going to be the main thing about who's going to pitch Game 1 in the conference tournament.
Yeah, I think if we had a chance to talk to Coach Ehalt, that would be the question I would ask him, is how he would deal with his pitching staff this week. Is he looking ahead to the tournament? I'm sure they are a little bit, but I wonder how important positioning for them is. Would they rather be the 3 seed? Would they rather be the 4 seed? Does it matter to them at all who they play in the first round? That's a big thing. So, like you said, they do have depth on their pitching staff. So if they want to rest McGee, which they've done at points this season, they can throw Tremarco or they can throw Singer. That's a huge advantage for Monmouth. And looking ahead to their game this week against the 2 games they have against Canisius during the week this week, that is a possible matchup down the line. I know that's looking far ahead, but Canisius is going to win the MAC regular season title. They'll have the number 1 seed most likely. They've been the best team all year in the MAC, and I know going into the season they were picked number 1 and Monmouth was picked number 2. So you talk about how hot Monmouth has been. Monmouth's won 11 in a row. Well, Canisius has won 12 in a row now. So both teams are hot at the right time. I said Canisius has been consistent the whole season. So looking ahead, that's a possible matchup in the MAC final. So does Monmouth throw their best pitchers in that game? So that'd be a very interesting question to pose to the coaching staff.
A lot of things coming together as we're approaching the end of the regular season. If you Hawk fans want to catch some MAC tournament baseball, you can head out to First Energy Park in Lakewood, New Jersey from May 21st to May 24th. We're trying to get some games on WMCX. Hopefully we can make that happen. We will keep you updated about that if you follow our WMCX Twitter page at WMCX Sports. We'll get you all your information you need, whether you want to listen to it on the radio on WMCX or even come out to the ballpark and catch a few games. But that's all we have this week, Joe, for our WMCX podcast. Great having you on as always, Joe. We'll get to another topic, another sport, or whatever's going on in the Monmouth sports world next week. Hopefully we'll have some good topics to talk about. But for Joe Lacalandra, I'm Mike Zimmerman. That was this week's WMCX podcast.